Mother bear, purred, low hums to steady the baby's heartbeat. What happened next was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like a gray blanket as Hazel Parker stepped out of her small cabin, cradling her 3-month-old daughter Luna against her chest. The baby had been restless all night, crying endlessly despite every attempt to soothe her. Dark circles shadowed Hazel's eyes as she rocked Luna gently, hoping the fresh mountain air might finally bring some peace. "Shh, sweet girl," Hazel whispered, her voice hoarse from exhaustion. "Mama's here. Everything's going to be okay." But Luna's tiny fists remained clenched, her face red from crying. The sound echoed through the quiet wilderness, a sharp contrast to the gentle rustling of leaves in the morning breeze. Hazel had moved to this remote cabin 6 months ago, seeking solitude after her husband's sudden death. She thought the peaceful isolation would help her heal, but now, alone with a sick baby, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The crying grew louder, more desperate. Hazel's heart raced as she felt Luna's forehead, still burning with fever despite the medicine she'd given her hours ago. The nearest hospital was 40 miles away on winding mountain roads, and her old truck had been making strange noises lately. Fear crept into her chest like ice water. "Please, Luna, please calm down," she begged, tears threatening to spill from her own eyes. From somewhere deep in the forest, another sound began to emerge. At first, Hazel thought it was just the wind through the trees, but as she listened more carefully, she realized it was something else entirely, a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to vibrate through the air itself. The sound was unlike anything she'd ever heard. It wasn't human, yet it carried a strange warmth, a comforting resonance that made her skin tingle. Luna's crying began to soften slightly, as if she too was listening to this mysterious melody. Hazel turned slowly toward the tree line, her heart pounding. The humming continued, steady and deep, seeming to come from multiple directions at once. Through the morning mist, she could make out a massive shape moving between the pine trees, something large and dark that moved with surprising grace. Her breath caught in her throat. A bear. An enormous female bear was standing at the edge of the clearing, her thick brown fur glistening with dew. But instead of the aggressive posture Hazel expected, the bear's head was tilted slightly, her dark eyes fixed on the crying baby with what looked almost like concern. The humming was coming from the bear. Luna's cries had reduced to soft whimpers now, her tiny body relaxing in Hazel's arms as the bear's deep, soothing sounds washed over them. The mother bear took a careful step forward, then another, her massive paws making barely a sound on the soft forest floor. Hazel knew she should run. Every instinct screamed at her to get inside, to protect her baby from this wild predator. But something about the bear's gentle approach, the way her eyes seemed filled with understanding rather than hunger, kept Hazel frozen in place. The bear was humming a lullaby. As impossible as it seemed, this wild creature was trying to comfort Luna with the same low, rumbling sounds that mother bears used to soothe their own cubs. The realization hit Hazel like a physical blow. This wasn't just any bear. This was a mother, responding to the distress of another mother's child. Luna's breathing began to slow, her fever-flushed cheeks losing some of their angry red color. The bear's humming grew slightly louder, more confident, as if she could sense it was working. She moved closer still, now only 20 feet away, her enormous head swaying gently as she continued her strange lullaby. Hazel felt tears streaming down her face, But they weren't tears of fear anymore. They were tears of wonder, of gratitude, of something so profound and unexpected that she had no words for it. Here, in this remote wilderness, when she had never felt more alone, help had come from the most unlikely source imaginable. The bear's dark eyes met Hazel's across the clearing, and in that moment something passed between them, an understanding that transcended species, a recognition of the universal bond between mothers and their young. The humming continued, steady and strong, and Luna finally fell into peaceful sleep. But as the miraculous moment stretched on, Hazel noticed something that made her blood run cold. Behind the mother bear, partially hidden in the thick underbrush, she could see a small shape moving restlessly. A cub. But this wasn't just any cub. Even from a distance, Hazel could tell something was terribly wrong with the little one. The cub was limping, dragging its left hind leg as it tried to follow its mother. Its fur was matted with what looked like dried blood, and it kept making soft, pained whimpering sounds that seemed to pierce through the morning air. The mother bear's humming faltered for just a moment, her massive head turning toward her injured offspring with an expression of such profound anguish that Hazel felt her heart break. This explained everything. The mother bear wasn't just responding to Luna's distress. She was carrying her own burden of worry, her own desperate need to comfort and heal. Her cub was hurt, possibly badly, and she was torn between protecting her young and responding to the cries of another mother's child. The bear resumed her humming, but now Hazel could hear a different quality in it, a tremor of pain, of exhaustion, of a mother pushed to her absolute limits. Luna slept peacefully in Hazel's arms, her tiny chest rising and falling in steady rhythm, but the bear's own baby was suffering. "Oh, you poor thing," Hazel whispered, her voice barely audible. "Your baby's hurt too, isn't he?" The mother bear's ears twitched at the sound of Hazel's voice, but she didn't move away. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The bear began to move closer, her massive form approaching with deliberate, careful steps. 20 feet became 15, then 10, then 5. Hazel could smell the wild, earthy scent of the bear's fur, could see the individual whiskers around her dark muzzle, could count the silver streaks that marked her as an older, experienced mother. The bear stopped just 3 feet away from the cabin's small porch where Hazel stood. This close, Hazel could see that the bear's eyes weren't just dark. They were a deep, intelligent brown, filled with worry and something that looked remarkably like hope. The humming continued, but now it was so close that Hazel could feel the vibrations through her own chest, matching the rhythm of her own heartbeat. Luna stirred slightly in her arms, and Hazel noticed something incredible. Her daughter's fever was breaking. The angry red flush was fading from her cheeks, replaced by a healthy pink glow. Her breathing was deeper, more relaxed than it had been in days. Whatever this bear was doing, whatever mysterious instinct was driving her to comfort a human child, it was actually working. But as Hazel marveled at this miracle, she heard the sound of an engine in the distance. A truck was coming up the mountain road, its motor straining against the steep grade. Her heart sank as she recognized the distinctive rumble. It was Jake Morrison's old Ford, the one he used for his hunting trips into the high country. Jake was Hazel's nearest neighbor, living about 5 miles down the mountain. He was a good man, a widower himself who had occasionally checked on her since she'd moved to the cabin. But Jake was also an experienced hunter, and Hazel knew exactly what he would do if he saw a massive bear this close to her and Luna. The bear heard the truck too. Her humming stopped abruptly, and her head snapped toward the sound of the approaching vehicle. Every muscle in her powerful body tensed, ready for flight or fight. The peaceful moment that had existed between them was shattering like glass. "No, wait," Hazel found herself saying, stepping forward slightly. "Please don't go." The bear looked at her with those intelligent brown eyes, and Hazel saw a conflict there. The wild animal wanted to flee, to protect herself and her cub from the approaching humans, but the mother in her was reluctant to leave, to abandon the peaceful sleep she had brought to Luna. The truck was getting closer. Hazel could hear the crunch of gravel under its tires as it navigated the narrow mountain road. In just a few minutes, Jake would round the final bend and see them, a woman and her baby standing impossibly close to one of the largest predators in North America. The bear's cub whimpered again from the bushes, a sound of pure misery that cut through the morning air like a knife. The mother bear's head swiveled toward her injured offspring, then back to Hazel and Luna, then toward the approaching truck. She was trapped between competing instincts, torn between protecting her own young and helping another mother in need. Hazel made a decision that would have seemed impossible just minutes earlier. Still holding Luna carefully in one arm, she slowly extended her free hand toward the bear. Not to touch, she wasn't that brave, but as a gesture of trust, of understanding. "I know you're trying to help," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion, "and I know your baby is hurt. I wish I could help him too." The bear stared at Hazel's outstretched hand for a long moment, her massive head tilting slightly as if she was considering something. The truck's engine was growing louder by the second. Soon, very soon, Jake would arrive, and this magical, impossible moment would end. But then the bear did something that would haunt Hazel's dreams for years to come. She reached out with her enormous paw, a paw that could kill with a single swipe, and gently, so gently that it barely registered as pressure, touched the tips of her claws to Hazel's fingertips. The contact lasted only a second, but in that brief moment Hazel felt something pass between them that was deeper than words, deeper than species, deeper than any barrier that should have existed between human and wild animal. It was understanding, recognition, and something that felt remarkably like friendship. Then the spell was broken by the sound of Jake's truck roaring into the clearing, its engine echoing off the surrounding mountains like thunder. The mother bear's reaction was instantaneous. She reared up on her hind legs, her massive form towering nearly 8 feet tall, every instinct screaming danger. Her peaceful humming transformed into a low, warning growl that rumbled through the forest like distant thunder. But instead of fleeing, as Hazel expected, the bear positioned herself between Hazel and the approaching truck, her powerful body forming a protective barrier. Jake's truck skidded to a halt, gravel spraying in all directions. Through the dusty windshield, Hazel could see Jake's weathered face go pale with shock. His door flew open and he stumbled out, his hunting rifle already in his hands. The bear's growl grew louder, more menacing, but she still didn't retreat. "Hazel!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking with panic. "Get inside! Now! That bear's gonna attack!" But Hazel found herself frozen, not by fear, but by the incredible realization of what was happening. The bear wasn't threatening her, she was protecting her. This wild animal, this powerful predator, had somehow decided that Hazel and Luna were under her care, and she was willing to face down an armed human to keep them safe. "Jake, don't shoot!" Hazel called out, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "She's not going to hurt us." "Are you crazy?" Jake's rifle was raised, his finger hovering over the trigger. "That's a grizzly, Hazel. She could tear you apart." The bear dropped back to all fours but remained positioned protectively in front of Hazel. Her massive head swiveled back and forth between Jake and the forest where her injured cub was hiding. Hazel could see the conflict in the bear's every movement, the desperate need to protect her own offspring warring with her inexplicable drive to guard the human mother and baby. Luna began to stir in Hazel's arms, her small face scrunching up as she sensed the tension in the air. The bear immediately noticed the baby's distress and began humming again, softer this time, trying to maintain the peace she had worked so hard to create. "Listen," Hazel said urgently, stepping slightly closer to the bear despite Jake's horrified expression. "Listen to that sound, Jake." She's trying to help Luna. She's been humming lullabies to calm her down. Jake's rifle wavered slightly, confusion replacing the grim determination on his face. "Lullabies?" "Hazel, what are you talking about? Bears don't sing lullabies." "This one does," Hazel said firmly. "She has a cub, Jake, a hurt cub. She understands what I'm going through." As if summoned by her words, the injured cub finally emerged from the underbrush, limping painfully toward its mother. The little bear was even worse off than Hazel had initially thought. Its left hind leg was clearly broken, hanging at an unnatural angle, and there were deep gashes along its side that looked like they might be from a mountain lion attack. The sight of the injured cub changed everything. Jake's rifle slowly lowered as he took in the pitiful sight of the little bear struggling to reach its mother. The mother bear's protective stance softened slightly, her massive head turning to nuzzle her wounded offspring with infinite tenderness. "Jesus," Jake whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Look at that little guy, he's all torn up." The cub collapsed beside its mother, exhausted from the effort of walking. Its small chest heaved with labored breathing, and it made soft whimpering sounds that were heartbreaking to hear. The mother bear began humming again, but now her melody was different, deeper, more mournful, filled with a mother's anguish at her child's pain. Hazel felt tears streaming down her face as she watched the tender scene. Here were two mothers, one human and one bear, both dealing with sick children, both pushed to the edge of their endurance by worry and fear. The connection she felt to this wild animal was stronger than anything she had ever experienced. "We have to help them," she said suddenly, surprising herself with her own words. Jake stared at her as if she had lost her mind. "Help them?" "Hazel, these are wild animals. That cub might not even survive, and the mother could turn on us at any second." But Hazel was already moving, carefully shifting Luna to one arm while reaching into her jacket pocket with the other. She pulled out the small bottle of children's pain medication she had been giving to Luna, along with a packet of antibiotic ointment from her first aid kit. "I'm a veterinary technician, Jake," she said, her voice steady despite the incredible nature of what she was about to attempt. "I worked at the animal hospital in Denver before I moved up here. I know how to treat wounds, and I know what that cub needs." The mother bear watched intently as Hazel slowly approached, her dark eyes tracking every movement. Luna had settled back into peaceful sleep, lulled by the bear's continued humming, but Hazel could feel the weight of the enormous animal's attention on her every step. "Easy, Mama," Hazel whispered, using the same tone she had used with countless frightened animals over the years. "I want to help your baby. I know you understand that." She knelt down about 6 feet away from the injured cub, close enough to see the extent of its wounds but far enough away to avoid triggering the mother's protective instincts. The cub's leg was definitely broken, but it was a clean break that could heal with proper care. The gashes on its side were deep but not life-threatening if they could be kept clean and infection-free. "Jake," she called softly, never taking her eyes off the bear family. "I need you to go to my cabin and get my medical supplies. There's a box under the bathroom sink with bandages, antiseptic, and splinting materials. And bring some of that leftover salmon from my freezer." Jake hesitated, clearly torn between his desire to help and his fear of leaving Hazel alone with the bears. "I don't like this, Hazel. This is dangerous." "Please," Hazel said, her voice carrying a note of desperation. "Look at them, Jake. Really look at them. She's not going to hurt us. She's asking for help the only way she knows how." As if to prove Hazel's point, the mother bear took a step back from her cub, creating space between them and Hazel. It was a gesture of trust so profound that it took Hazel's breath away. This wild animal was allowing a human to approach her most precious possession, her injured baby. Jake saw it too. His shoulders sagged with the weight of understanding, and he nodded slowly. "All right," he said quietly, "but I'm leaving my rifle right here where I can grab it if things go wrong." As Jake hurried toward the cabin, Hazel found herself alone with the bear family in a way that should have been terrifying, but somehow felt completely natural. The mother bear's humming had taken on a different quality now, hopeful, expectant, as if she truly believed that help was coming for her cub. Luna slept peacefully in Hazel's arms, her fever completely broken, her breathing steady and strong. The bear's lullabies had accomplished what hours of medication and worry had failed to do, and now, perhaps, Hazel could return the favor. The injured cub lifted its small head and looked directly at Hazel with eyes that were miniature versions of its mother's, intelligent, trusting, and filled with pain. In that moment, Hazel made a promise to herself and to the bear family that she would do everything in her power to heal this little one. But as she waited for Jake to return with the medical supplies, she had no idea that their troubles were just beginning. Hidden in the dense forest beyond the clearing, other eyes were watching. Human eyes, belonging to men who had been tracking this particular bear for days, men who had laid traps and set snares, men who would stop at nothing to claim their prize. The hunters had found them. Through the thick pine trees, barely visible in the morning shadows, Hazel caught a glimpse of camouflage clothing and the metallic glint of rifle barrels. Her blood turned to ice as she realized they were completely surrounded. At least 4 men, maybe more, had positioned themselves in a perfect circle around the clearing. They had been tracking the mother bear, and now they had her exactly where they wanted her, out in the open, distracted by her injured cub and the strange human interaction. The mother bear sensed the danger before anyone else. Her massive head lifted suddenly, nostrils flaring as she caught the scent of the hidden men. The peaceful humming stopped abruptly, replaced by a low, rumbling growl that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. Her hackles raised, making her appear even larger and more formidable than before. Jake emerged from the cabin carrying Hazel's medical supplies, but he stopped dead in his tracks when he saw the bear's aggressive posture. His eyes darted around the tree line, and Hazel saw the exact moment he spotted the hunters. His face went pale as he realized the trap they had all walked into. "Hazel," he called out in a barely controlled whisper, "we need to get out of here, now." But Hazel found herself caught between impossible choices. If she moved toward Jake and the cabin, she would be abandoning the injured cub, leaving him to die or be captured by the hunters. If she stayed where she was, she and Luna would be caught in the crossfire when the shooting started, and it would start. She could see it in the mother bear's eyes, in the tense set of her powerful shoulders. This wild animal was preparing to fight to the death to protect her baby. The injured cub tried to stand as he sensed his mother's distress, but his broken leg gave out immediately, and he collapsed with a pitiful cry of pain. The sound seemed to break something inside the mother bear. Her growls became more desperate, more anguished, as she realized she couldn't both fight the hunters and protect her helpless offspring. "Easy, Mama," Hazel whispered, her voice shaking but determined. "I'm not going to let them hurt him." She made a decision that went against every survival instinct she possessed. Instead of running for safety, she moved closer to the injured cub, positioning herself between the little bear and the hidden hunters. Luna slept on in her arms, completely unaware of the deadly tension crackling through the air around them. The mother bear stared at Hazel with those intelligent brown eyes, and something passed between them again. An understanding, a pact. Hazel was declaring herself protector of the cub, and the mother bear was accepting that protection, even from a human. "I've got a clean shot at the big one," a voice called out from the forest, rough and eager. "She's right out in the open." "Hold your fire," another voice responded, this one carrying the authority of leadership. "There's civilians in the way. We wait for a clear shot." Jake had heard the voices too. He set down the medical supplies and reached for his rifle, his weathered hand steady despite the fear Hazel could see in his eyes. "There's at least 4 of them," he called out quietly. "Maybe more. They've been planning this." The leader of the hunting party stepped partially into view, a tall man with graying hair and cold blue eyes. His expensive hunting gear and professional equipment marked him as someone who made a living from tracking dangerous game. He raised his hand in what might have been a greeting, but his smile was predatory. "Morning, folks," he called out, his voice deceptively friendly. "Name's Carson Mitchell. We've been tracking this particular bear for 3 days now. She killed 2 hunting dogs and injured one of my clients pretty badly. We're here to put her down before she hurts anyone else." Hazel felt her heart sink. If the bear had already been involved in violent encounters with humans, then these hunters had legal justification for what they were planning to do. But looking at the mother bear now, seeing the way she was trying to comfort her injured cub while simultaneously preparing to defend him, Hazel couldn't believe this animal was a mindless killer. "She's not aggressive," Hazel called back, surprised by the strength in her own voice. "She's been helping my baby, singing to her. She's just a mother trying to protect her cub." Carson's laugh was harsh and skeptical. "Lady, I've been hunting bears for 20 years. They don't sing lullabies. What you're seeing is predatory behavior. She's sizing you up, deciding when to attack." But even as he spoke, the mother bear began humming again. The sound was different now. Not the peaceful lullaby she had used to calm Luna, but something deeper, more mournful. It was a sound of grief, of desperate love, of a mother who knew she was about to lose everything she cared about. The injured cub responded to his mother's humming by lifting his small head and making soft chirping sounds, trying to harmonize with her deeper tones. It was such a purely emotional moment, such a clear display of the bond between mother and child, that even Carson seemed momentarily taken aback. "You hear that?" Hazel said, her voice carrying clearly across the clearing. "You hear how she's comforting him? This isn't a killer, Mr. Mitchell. This is a mother who's terrified for her baby's life." One of the other hunters, a younger man with nervous eyes, lowered his rifle slightly. "Carson, maybe we should reconsider. If the bear's not being aggressive—" "She killed Rex and Charlie," Carson snapped back. "Good dogs, worth more than most people, and she nearly took Thompson's arm off. I don't care how motherly she looks right now, she's dangerous." Jake had been quietly moving during this exchange, positioning himself where he could get a clear shot at Carson if necessary. "What if we could capture her instead?" he called out. "Tranquilize her and the cub, relocate them somewhere far from people." Carson's expression turned contemptuous. "You think this is some kind of nature documentary? That bear has tasted human blood. She'll keep coming back, keep attacking. The only solution is permanent." The mother bear seemed to understand that the humans were discussing her fate. Her humming became more urgent, more pleading, as if she was trying to communicate something crucial that only Hazel could understand. The injured cub struggled again to stand, his small body shaking with effort and pain. That's when Hazel noticed something that changed everything. Mixed in with the dried blood on the cub's matted fur were strange marks. Not claw marks from a mountain lion as she had assumed, but something else entirely. They looked like rope burns, as if the little bear had been caught in a snare or trap and had fought desperately to escape. "Jake," she called out urgently, "look at the cub's injuries. Those aren't animal attacks." Jake squinted across the clearing, his experienced eyes taking in the details of the cub's wounds. His face darkened with understanding and anger. "Those are trap marks," he said loudly enough for the hunters to hear. "Someone set snares for these bears." The mother bear's behavior suddenly made perfect sense. She hadn't attacked those hunting dogs out of aggression. She had been trying to rescue her cub from human-set traps. The dogs had been part of a hunting party, probably working with Carson's group to drive the bears toward their snares. When the mother bear had tried to free her baby, the dogs had attacked, and she had fought back with the desperate fury of a parent protecting her child. "You set traps for them," Hazel accused, her voice shaking with outrage. "You hurt her baby, and when she tried to save him, you killed her dogs, and now you want to kill her too." Carson's friendly mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation underneath. "Trapping is perfectly legal in this county, lady, and so is protecting yourself when a wild animal attacks." But his words rang hollow in the face of what they were all witnessing. The mother bear wasn't a mindless killer. She was a desperate mother who had already lost so much and was about to lose everything else. Her humming grew louder, more desperate, as if she was singing her own funeral song, and her cub's lullaby at the same time. Luna stirred in Hazel's arms, her small face scrunching up as she sensed the tension around her. Without thinking, Hazel began to hum along with the mother bear, adding her own human voice to the animal's mourning song. The harmony they created was hauntingly beautiful. A bridge between species that spoke of shared loss, shared love, shared desperation. The sound had an unexpected effect on everyone present. The young hunter who had shown doubt earlier lowered his rifle completely, tears visible in his eyes. Even Jake seemed moved by the strange duet between human and bear. But Carson's expression only grew harder, more determined. "Enough of this nonsense," he snarled, raising his own rifle. "I'm ending this now." But as his finger tightened on the trigger, something extraordinary happened. From deep in the forest, other sounds began to emerge. More humming, deeper and more varied than the mother bear's voice. The trees seemed to come alive with the sounds of bears, not aggressive roars or threatening growls, but the same melodic humming that the mother bear had been using to comfort her cub. They were surrounded, not just by Carson's hunters, but by an entire family of bears who had come in response to the mother's distress calls. The forest was full of them. Fathers, siblings, cousins, grandparents, all humming their support, their love, their readiness to protect one of their own. Carson's rifle wavered as he realized the magnitude of what they were facing. This wasn't just one mother bear with an injured cub. This was an entire extended family, and they were all willing to fight to protect their own. The forest had transformed into a living cathedral of sound. From every direction, the deep, resonant humming of bears filled the air, creating a harmony so complex and beautiful that it seemed impossible such wild creatures could produce it. There had to be at least a dozen bears hidden in the trees, maybe more, their voices weaving together in what could only be described as a song of solidarity. Carson's hunting party was beginning to panic. The young hunter who had shown doubt earlier was backing away slowly, his rifle forgotten at his side. "Carson, this isn't what we signed up for," he whispered, his voice shaking. "We're outnumbered 20-1. "Stay calm," Carson ordered, but Hazel could hear the uncertainty creeping into his voice. "They're just trying to intimidate us. Bears don't coordinate attacks like this. But even as he spoke, the impossible was happening before their eyes. Through the morning mist, massive shapes began to emerge from the tree line, not charging or aggressive, but moving with deliberate, coordinated purpose. An enormous male bear, easily twice the size of the mother, positioned himself between Carson's group and the clearing. To the east, a smaller female with 2 yearling cubs took up a similar defensive position. To the west, what looked like an elderly patriarch of the clan, scarred and grizzled from years of survival, stood like a living monument to the wild. The humming grew louder, more insistent, and Hazel realized she was witnessing something that few humans had ever seen. A bear family coming together in crisis, supporting one of their own, with a sophistication that challenged everything she thought she knew about animal behavior. Luna had awakened during the incredible chorus, but instead of crying, she seemed mesmerized by the sound. Her tiny hands reached toward the mother bear, and she made soft cooing noises as if trying to join the song herself. The mother bear noticed Luna's response and stepped closer, her massive head lowering until she was just inches from the baby. "Hazel, get away from there," Jake warned, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he could see that the bear meant no harm. The mother bear began to hum directly to Luna, a soft, intimate lullaby that was different from her earlier songs. This was personal, intended specifically for this human child who had somehow become part of her story. Luna giggled in response, her small hand actually touching the bear's wet nose for a brief moment before Hazel gently pulled her back. "She knows Luna," Hazel whispered in wonder. "She really knows her." That's when Carson made his fatal mistake. Frustrated by the delay and unnerved by the supernatural scene unfolding before him, he decided to take action. "Enough of this circus," he snarled, and fired a warning shot into the air. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. Every bear in the forest fell silent at once, the beautiful harmony cutting off as if someone had thrown a switch. The sudden absence of sound was more frightening than any roar could have been. Then, slowly, ominously, the silence was replaced by a different sound altogether. The low, rumbling growl of a dozen angry bears. The mother bear's protective instincts exploded into action. She reared up on her hind legs, towering over everyone in the clearing. Her massive paws spread wide and her teeth bared in a display of raw power that made Carson stumble backward. But she didn't attack. Instead, she positioned herself like a living shield between her cub, Hazel, and the hunters. The other bears responded in kind. The massive male who had been blocking Carson's escape route rose to his full height, easily 9 feet tall, his roar echoing off the mountains like thunder. The elderly patriarch emerged fully from the trees, his weathered face showing scars from countless battles, his presence alone enough to make grown men question their life choices. "You idiots," Jake shouted at the hunting party. "You've made them angry, now they really will attack." But as the bears closed in from all sides, something even more unexpected happened. A new voice cut through the tension. Human, but speaking in a language none of them recognized. From the northern edge of the clearing, an elderly man emerged from the forest, walking calmly despite the circle of agitated bears surrounding him. The man was clearly Native American, probably in his 70s, with long gray hair braided down his back, and clothes that looked like they had been made by hand from animal skins. But what was most remarkable was the way the bears reacted to his presence. Their aggressive postures relaxed slightly, and several of them actually moved aside to let him pass. "Joseph Strongbear," Jake breathed, recognition dawning on his face. "I thought you were just a legend." The old man walked directly toward the mother bear and her cub, speaking in what sounded like a mixture of different native languages, interspersed with sounds that were remarkably similar to the bear's own humming. The mother bear listened intently, her massive head tilted toward him as if she understood every word. "You know this man?" Hazel asked Jake, never taking her eyes off the incredible scene. "He's from the reservation, about 50 miles north of here," Jake explained quietly. "People say he can talk to animals, that he's some kind of medicine man or something. Most folks think he's just a crazy old hermit." But there was nothing crazy about what they were witnessing. Joseph Strongbear was having an actual conversation with the mother bear, complete with gestures and responses that suggested genuine communication. The bear would hum something in her deep, resonant voice, and Joseph would respond with a combination of human words and bear-like sounds. It was impossible, yet it was happening right in front of them. Carson had lowered his rifle, his face pale with confusion and fear. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded. Joseph turned to face the hunting party, his weathered face grave with disapproval. When he spoke, his English was perfect, though heavily accented. "You have violated sacred ground," he said simply. "This family has lived in these mountains for generations. The mother's name is Singing Moon, and she has been the guardian of this valley for 10 years. "Guardian?" Carson scoffed, though his voice shook slightly. "It's just a bear? Just a bear?" Joseph's eyes flashed with anger. Singing Moon has saved 3 lost hikers, guided them back to safety when they would have died of exposure. She has warned the Forest Service of avalanche dangers by leading rangers to unstable areas. She has protected these mountains and everything in them, including ungrateful humans who see her only as a trophy. The old man turned to the injured cub, speaking to him in the same mixture of languages he had used with the mother. The little bear responded with soft chirping sounds, as if answering questions about his condition. "His name is Little Thunder," Joseph translated. "He was caught in one of your snares 3 days ago. His mother fought your dogs not out of aggression, but to save her son's life. She has been caring for his wounds, but infection is setting in. Without help, he will die." Hazel stepped forward, still carrying Luna in her arms. "I can help him," she said firmly. "I have medical training and I have supplies, but these men have to put down their weapons first." Carson laughed harshly. "Lady, I don't know what kind of Disney movie you think you're living in, but I'm not lowering my rifle around a pack of wild bears." That's when the massive male bear, apparently Singing Moon's mate, decided he had heard enough. With a roar that shook leaves from the trees, he charged directly at Carson, covering the 30 feet between them in seconds. Carson screamed and raised his rifle, but before he could fire, something incredible happened. Singing Moon's voice rose above the chaos, not in a roar, but in her distinctive humming. The sound was so pure, so commanding, that her mate stopped mid-charge, just inches from Carson's trembling form. She was calling him back, asking him to trust her, to let her handle this situation in her own way. The massive bear looked at Carson with eyes full of contempt, then slowly backed away, responding to his mate's call for restraint. But the message was clear. He could have killed the hunter easily, and chose not to only because Singing Moon had asked him to spare the man's life. "My God," whispered the young hunter who had been having doubts. "She just saved your life, Carson. That bear just saved your life." Joseph nodded approvingly. Singing Moon believes in justice, not revenge. She could have let Thundercloud kill you all, but she chooses mercy instead. The question is, will you show the same wisdom? Carson's rifle was shaking so badly he could barely hold it. The encounter with Thundercloud had stripped away all his bravado, leaving him face to face with the reality of what these animals truly were. Not mindless beasts, but intelligent beings with their own code of ethics, their own capacity for both violence and restraint. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Joseph gestured toward Little Thunder, who was struggling to stay conscious as his injuries took their toll. "Help the cub. Remove your traps from this valley. Leave this family in peace. Do this, and you will be allowed to leave unharmed." "And if we refuse?" one of the other hunters asked nervously. Joseph didn't answer directly. Instead, he made a sound that was half human speech and half bear call. From the forest around them came answering calls, not just from the dozen bears they had already seen, but from what sounded like dozens more. The entire mountain seemed to be alive with the sounds of bears responding to Joseph's summons. "There are 43 bears within hearing distance of my voice," Joseph said calmly. "All of them are related to Singing Moon and Little Thunder. All of them are willing to fight to protect their family. You have weapons, but they have numbers, knowledge of this terrain, and something you lack, a cause worth dying for." The hunting party huddled together, their earlier confidence completely shattered. They were surrounded by an army of bears, all of whom seemed to be taking orders from an old man who could apparently speak their language. It was like something out of a fever dream, except the very real possibility of being torn apart by wild animals made it impossible to dismiss as fantasy. Hazel seized the moment of uncertainty. "Let me treat the cub," she said, addressing both Joseph and Singing Moon. "I promise I can help him. But I need everyone to stay calm, and I need Carson's men to put down their weapons." Singing Moon looked at Hazel with those intelligent brown eyes, then at Luna sleeping peacefully in her arms. Some wordless communication passed between the two mothers, and Singing Moon began to hum again. Not the aggressive warning she had used to stop Thundercloud, but the gentle lullaby she had first used to calm Luna's cries. It was a song of trust, of hope, of a mother placing her most precious possession in the hands of another mother who understood the depth of that love. And as the haunting melody filled the clearing once again, even Carson's hardened heart began to soften, touched by something he had never expected to find in the wilderness, the universal language of maternal love. But as Hazel knelt beside Little Thunder with her medical supplies, preparing to treat his wounds, a new sound cut through the morning air that made everyone freeze. The distant roar of helicopter blades, growing steadily louder, approaching from the south. Joseph's weathered face darkened with concern as he recognized what this meant. "Fish and wildlife," he said grimly. "Someone reported the bear sightings." Carson's face lit up with renewed hope. "Thank God," he breathed. "The authorities are coming. They'll handle this situation properly." But Joseph was already shaking his head. "You don't understand. Fish and Wildlife has standing orders to eliminate any bear that's been involved in human conflicts. They won't ask questions. They'll just start shooting." The helicopter appeared over the tree line, a large black aircraft with government markings. Through its windows, Hazel could see armed officers preparing tranquilizer guns and high-powered rifles. The sight of so many bears in one location would trigger an immediate response. They would view it as an unprecedented threat that needed to be neutralized quickly and efficiently. Singing Moon heard the helicopter too, and her maternal instincts kicked into overdrive. She began humming frantically to the other bears, and one by one they started melting back into the forest. But she couldn't leave, not with Little Thunder injured and unable to move quickly. She was trapped between her need to protect her cub and her need to flee from the approaching danger. "They're going to kill them all," Hazel realized with growing horror. "The authorities won't understand what's really happening here. They'll see armed hunters, injured people, and dozens of bears, and they'll assume the worst." The helicopter was circling now, looking for a place to land. Through a bullhorn, an official voice crackled down to them. "This is Agent Morrison with Fish and Wildlife. All civilians move away from the bears immediately. We are authorized to use lethal force." Agent Morrison. Hazel's heart sank as she realized the cruel irony. The man in charge of the wildlife response was Jake's cousin, someone who had been called in specifically because of his knowledge of the local area. He would trust Jake's judgment, but he would also follow protocol to the letter. "Jake!" Hazel called out desperately. "You have to talk to your cousin. You have to make him understand." But Jake was already moving, running toward the small clearing where the helicopter was preparing to land. Thunderclouds started to follow him, interpreting Jake's sudden movement as a threat, but Singing Moon's humming called him back once again. She was somehow managing to maintain control over the situation, even as it spiraled toward disaster. Joseph knelt beside Hazel as she worked on Little Thunder's wounds. The cub was weaker than she had initially thought. The infection from his trap injuries was spreading rapidly, and he was beginning to show signs of septic shock. His breathing was shallow and rapid, his small body burning with fever. "Can you save him?" Joseph asked quietly, his weathered hands gentle as he helped hold Little Thunder still. "I don't know," Hazel admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "He needs antibiotics, IV fluids, maybe surgery. I can stabilize him here, but he needs a real veterinary hospital." Singing Moon seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. Her humming became more urgent, more desperate, as if she was pouring all her love and hope into the sound. Luna, still in Hazel's arms, began crying softly, apparently sensing the sadness around her. That's when something extraordinary happened. Singing Moon reached out with one massive paw and gently touched Luna's tiny hand. The baby's crying stopped immediately, replaced by soft cooing sounds. At the same time, Little Thunder's labored breathing began to ease slightly, as if his mother's touch was somehow transferring her strength to both children. "It's not possible," Hazel whispered, watching the interaction between the bear and her daughter. "But Luna's vitals are improving. Her fever is completely gone." Joseph nodded knowingly. Singing Moon has gifts that science doesn't understand. Her songs can heal, her touch can comfort. That's why she's been the guardian of this valley for so long. The helicopter had landed, and Agent Morrison was approaching with a team of armed officers. Hazel could see Jake gesticulating wildly, trying to explain the situation, but the agents were focused on the obvious threat: dozens of massive bears surrounding a group of civilians. "All bears in this area are to be considered dangerous," Agent Morrison announced through his bullhorn. "We have reports of multiple attacks on humans and domestic animals. Lethal force is authorized." Carson, seeing an opportunity to regain control of the situation, stepped forward. "Agent Morrison, I'm Carson Mitchell, licensed hunting guide. These bears have been terrorizing the area for days. The big female there killed 2 of my dogs and injured one of my clients." But before Agent Morrison could respond, one of his officers made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the underbrush near where the hunting party had been positioned, he found something that made him call out in alarm. "Sir, you need to see this!" The officer emerged from the trees carrying several illegal bear traps. Not the quick kill snares that were sometimes permitted, but massive leg-hold traps designed to capture bears alive for the illegal wildlife trade. The traps were custom-made, worth thousands of dollars each, and clearly not the kind of equipment a legitimate hunting guide would use. Agent Morrison's expression darkened as he examined the traps. "These are illegal in every state," he said, his voice cold with authority. "Possession alone is a federal crime. Mr. Mitchell, you're under arrest." Carson's face went white as he realized his carefully constructed story was falling apart. "Those aren't mine," he protested. "I've never seen them before." But the young hunter who had been having doubts earlier chose that moment to come clean. "They are his," he said, his voice shaking with emotion. "He hired us to help him capture bears for some private zoo in Texas. He said we could make $20,000 each if we brought back a breeding pair alive." The revelation hit everyone like a physical blow. This hadn't been about protecting people from dangerous bears. It had been about money, about capturing wild animals for profit. Carson had been lying about everything, using the story of attacked dogs and injured clients to justify what was actually an illegal poaching operation. Agent Morrison turned to Joseph, recognizing him from previous encounters. "Joseph Strongbear, I should have known you'd be involved in something like this. What's the real story here?" Joseph's explanation was brief but comprehensive. He told Agent Morrison about Singing Moon's role as guardian of the valley, about Little Thunder's injuries from Carson's illegal traps, and about the incredible display of intelligence and cooperation they had all witnessed from the bear family. "The mother bear has been helping this woman's sick baby," Joseph concluded, gesturing toward the Hazel and Luna. "She sings lullabies to calm the child. She has shown more compassion than the humans who came here to capture her." Agent Morrison looked skeptical until he heard it for himself. Singing Moon, perhaps understanding that this new human held her family's fate in his hands, began to hum once again. But this time, her song was different, older, deeper, filled with a wisdom that seemed to span generations. Luna responded immediately, reaching out toward the bear with a delighted giggle. The sight of a human baby interacting so peacefully with a massive grizzly bear was something Agent Morrison had never seen in 20 years of wildlife management. "That's impossible," he breathed. "Bears they don't do that." "This one does," Hazel said firmly, never stopping her work on Little Thunder's wounds. "She's been helping my daughter all morning, and now I'm trying to help her son." Agent Morrison watched in fascination as Hazel applied antiseptic to the cub's wounds, carefully setting his broken leg with a makeshift splint. Little Thunder remained remarkably calm during the procedure, as if he understood that this human was trying to help him. Singing Moon's humming provided a constant backdrop of comfort and encouragement. "The cub needs immediate veterinary care," Hazel continued. "His injuries are severe, and the infection is spreading. He could die without proper treatment. The nearest wildlife rehabilitation center is 3 hours away," Agent Morrison said slowly. "And they don't usually treat animals this large." That's when Jake stepped forward with an idea that surprised everyone. "What about Dr. Sarah Chen at the Mountain View Animal Hospital? She's treated injured wildlife before, and she has the facilities to handle a bear cub." Dr. Chen was a legend in the local area, a veterinarian who had built her practice specifically to serve both domestic and wild animals. Her hospital was only an hour away, and she had the expertise and equipment needed to save Little Thunder's life. But there was a problem. Even if Dr. Chen agreed to treat the cub, transporting a wild bear, even a small one, would require special permits and equipment that could take days to arrange. Little Thunder didn't have days. Singing Moon seemed to understand the dilemma. She looked at Agent Morrison with those intelligent brown eyes, then at her injured cub, then back at the agent, and then she did something that defied every rule of wild animal behavior. She stepped back from Little Thunder and sat down, making herself appear smaller and less threatening. It was a gesture of submission, of trust, of a mother voluntarily placing her child's life in human hands. "She's giving us permission," Joseph said softly. "She wants us to take her cub to the hospital." Agent Morrison stared at the scene before him. a wild grizzly bear willingly surrendering her injured offspring to humans, trusting them to save his life. It went against everything he had been trained to believe about wildlife behavior. "This is unprecedented," he said finally. "I don't even know what the protocol is for something like this." Thundercloud had been watching the proceedings from the edge of the clearing, and now he approached slowly, his massive form moving with careful deliberation. He stopped beside Singing Moon and began humming along with her, adding his deeper voice to her melody. It was a sound of agreement, of support for his mate's decision. One by one, the other bears began to emerge from the forest again, drawn by the sounds of their family's song. They formed a loose circle around the clearing, not threatening but protective, showing their support for Singing Moon's choice while making it clear that they would defend her if things went wrong. 43 bears, Agent Morrison muttered, doing a quick count. "I've never seen anything like this in my life." The young hunter who had confessed about Carson's illegal operation stepped forward hesitantly. "Agent Morrison, sir, I'd like to help transport the cub. I know I was part of this mess, but I want to make it right." His offer seemed to break some kind of spell that had been holding everyone frozen. Suddenly, people were moving with purpose. Jake was on his radio calling Dr. Chen to explain the situation. Agent Morrison was coordinating with his team to arrange an emergency wildlife transport. Even some of Carson's other hunters were offering to help, clearly shaken by what they had witnessed and eager to atone for their part in the illegal operation. But as the preparations began, a new crisis emerged. Little Thunder's condition was deteriorating rapidly. The stress of the morning's events, combined with his untreated injuries, was taking a severe toll on his small body. His breathing became labored, his eyes glazed with fever, and he began making soft, distressed sounds that clearly alarmed his mother. Singing Moon's humming became more frantic, more desperate. She nuzzled her cub gently, trying to provide comfort, but it was clear that her songs alone wouldn't be enough to save him this time. "We're losing him," Hazel said urgently, checking Little Thunder's pulse. "His heart rate is dropping. We need to move now, or it's going to be too late." Agent Morrison made the fastest decision of his career. "Jake, get your truck. We're making an emergency run to Dr. Chen's hospital. Radio ahead, and tell her we're coming in hot with a critical patient." But as they prepared to lift Little Thunder into Jake's truck, Singing Moon did something that stopped everyone in their tracks. She began to sing. Not the gentle humming they had heard before, but something deeper, more complex. Her voice rose and fell in patterns that seemed almost human, filled with emotion so raw and pure that it brought tears to every person's eyes. The other bears joined her, their voices creating a harmony that seemed to encompass the entire mountain. It was a goodbye song, a blessing, a mother's prayer for her child's survival. The sound was so hauntingly beautiful that even Agent Morrison found himself wiping away tears. "She's asking us to save him," Joseph translated, his own voice thick with emotion. "She's telling him to be brave, that he's going to good people who will help him heal." Thundercloud approached the truck as they loaded Little Thunder into the makeshift transport bed that Jake had lined with blankets. The massive bear looked directly at Agent Morrison, and for a moment, man and beast stared at each other with mutual understanding. Then, Thundercloud placed one enormous paw gently on the side of the truck, a gesture that seemed to say, "Take care of our son." The convoy raced down the mountain roads, Jake's truck in the lead with Agent Morrison's helicopter providing aerial escort. In the back of the truck, Hazel held Little Thunder while continuing to monitor his vital signs. Luna slept peacefully in her carrier, somehow sensing that the crisis was passing. "His pulse is stabilizing," Hazel called out as they reached the halfway point. "Whatever Singing Moon did, it's working." Dr. Chen was waiting at her hospital with a full emergency team. The sight of a government helicopter and multiple vehicles arriving with a wild bear cub would have been shocking under normal circumstances, but Jake's radio call had prepared her for the extraordinary situation. "Get him into surgery immediately," Dr. Chen ordered as they carried Little Thunder inside. "I can see severe infection and what looks like a compound fracture." As the medical team took over, Hazel found herself standing in the hospital waiting room with Luna, surrounded by the strangest group of people she had ever imagined. Agent Morrison was on his radio, explaining to his superiors why he had authorized emergency medical treatment for a wild bear. The reformed hunters were sitting quietly, clearly overwhelmed by everything they had witnessed. Jake was calling the local news stations, knowing that this story needed to be told. 3 hours later, Dr. Chen emerged from surgery with news that made everyone cheer. "Little Thunder is going to be fine," she announced, with a tired but happy smile. "The leg was badly broken, but I was able to repair it completely. The infection was serious, but we caught it in time. He'll need several weeks of recovery, but he should make a full recovery." "Can we take him back to his mother?" Hazel asked immediately. Dr. Chen nodded. "In about a month, when the bones have healed and the infection is completely gone. But there's something else you should know. I found evidence of multiple old injuries. This little guy has been through trauma before. His mother has been caring for him with remarkable skill." The drive back up the mountain was filled with anticipation. Agent Morrison had made some calls during the wait, and remarkable things had begun happening. The illegal wildlife trafficking charges against Carson were being pursued by federal prosecutors. The area around Singing Moon's territory was being designated as a protected wildlife sanctuary, and most importantly, a fund had been established to support Dr. Chen's treatment of injured wildlife. As they approached the clearing, they could hear the bears before they could see them. The entire family was still there, waiting. Their voices joined in what sounded like a song of hope. When Jake's truck appeared through the trees, the singing grew louder, more joyful. Agent Morrison stepped out of his vehicle carrying a radio tuned to a special frequency. "Joseph, can you explain to Singing Moon that her cub is alive and healing? Tell her that in 1 month, when the moon is full again, we'll bring him home." Joseph spoke to Singing Moon in the complex mixture of languages he had used before, his weathered hands gesturing toward the distant hospital. The mother bear listened intently, her massive head tilted in concentration. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then Singing Moon began to hum again, but this time her song was different. It was filled with gratitude, with relief, with a joy so profound that it seemed to make the very air shimmer. One by one, the other bears joined her, creating a chorus of celebration that echoed off the mountains. Thundercloud approached Agent Morrison directly, his enormous form moving with careful dignity. He stopped just a few feet away and made a sound that was part growl, part purr. Clearly a greeting, a thank you, a recognition of what this human had done for their family. "I think he's adopting you," Joseph said, with the first smile anyone had seen from him all day. But the most remarkable moment was yet to come. Singing Moon approached Hazel, who was still holding Luna in her arms. The massive bear mother and the human mother looked at each other across the species divide, and something passed between them that needed no translation. Singing Moon began to hum the same lullaby she had used to calm Luna that morning. But now Luna joined in with her own baby sounds, creating an impossible duet between human infant and wild bear. The song they created together was so beautiful, so pure, that everyone present felt they were witnessing something sacred. As the lullaby continued, Singing Moon gently reached out with one massive paw and touched Luna's tiny hand. This time, instead of pulling away, Hazel allowed the contact, trusting completely in the bond that had formed between them. "She's blessing your daughter," Joseph explained softly. "In our traditions, when a bear touches a human child like this, it means the child will always be protected by the spirits of the wild. Luna will never be truly lost as long as she carries this blessing." The touching ceremony continued for several minutes, with the singing moon humming her protective songs while Luna giggled and reached for the bear's fur. Finally, the mother bear stepped back and looked at Hazel with eyes that seemed to say, "Thank you for saving my son." Agent Morrison cleared his throat, breaking the spell of the moment. "The sanctuary designation should be official within a week," he announced. "This entire valley will be protected habitat. No hunting, no trapping, no development. Singing Moon and her family will be safe here forever." As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across the clearing, the bear family began to disperse back into the forest. But they left slowly, reluctantly, each bear stopping to look back at the humans who had saved one of their own. Singing Moon was the last to leave. She stood at the edge of the trees, her massive form silhouetted against the evening sky, and sang one final song. It was a lullaby of farewell, a promise to remember, a bridge between two worlds that would never be completely separate again. 1 month later, on the night of the full moon, they returned Little Thunder to his family. The reunion was everything Hazel had hoped it would be, and more. Singing Moon's joy at seeing her healthy, healed cub was so overwhelming that her songs of celebration could be heard for miles around the mountain. Dr. Chen had fitted Little Thunder with a small tracking collar that would allow them to monitor his recovery from a distance. As they watched the little bear run and play with his cousins, showing no signs of his former injuries, Hazel felt a deep satisfaction that she had never experienced before. "He's going to be fine, Doctor," Chen confirmed, watching Little Thunder through binoculars. Better than fine, actually. That break healed stronger than the original bone. Luna, now 4 months old and thriving, seemed to remember her connection to the bear family. She would giggle and reach toward the forest whenever they visited the sanctuary, as if she could sense Singing Moon's presence even when the bears were hidden from view. Jake had become the unofficial guardian of the sanctuary, checking on the bear family regularly and ensuring that no unauthorized humans entered their protected territory. Agent Morrison had requested a transfer to the local wildlife office, finding that his encounter with Singing Moon had changed his entire perspective on wildlife management. The young hunter who had confessed about Carson's operation had enrolled in veterinary school, inspired by what he had witnessed. He often volunteered at Dr. Chen's hospital, working with injured wildlife and telling anyone who would listen about the day he saw a mother bear sing lullabies to a human baby. Carson himself was serving a 5-year federal sentence for wildlife trafficking, but even he had been changed by the experience. From his prison cell, he had written letters to wildlife conservation organizations, donating his entire savings to support bear protection programs. But perhaps the most profound change was in Hazel herself. The lonely, grieving widow who had moved to the mountains seeking isolation had found instead a new purpose, a new family, and a connection to the natural world that she had never imagined possible. On quiet evenings when Luna was sleeping peacefully in her crib, Hazel would step onto her cabin's porch and listen to the sounds of the forest. Sometimes, if the wind was just right, she could hear it. The distant, melodic humming of Singing Moon carried on the night air like a lullaby for the entire mountain, and Hazel would hum along, adding her human voice to the bear's ancient song, creating a harmony that bridged the gap between species and reminded everyone who heard it that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force in the wilderness. Luna would grow up knowing that she had been blessed by the wild, that somewhere in the protected valley lived a bear family who considered her part of their extended clan. And on nights when the full moon rose over the mountains, if she listened very carefully, she could still hear Singing Moon's lullabies, promising protection, promising love, promising that some bonds transcend all boundaries. The story of the mother bear who purred low hums to steady a baby's heartbeat became legend in the mountain communities, passed down through generations as proof that miracles still happened in the modern world. But for those who had lived it, who had witnessed the impossible become reality, it was something far more precious than legend. It was a reminder that in a world often divided by fear and misunderstanding, love could still triumph. That mothers, regardless of species, shared a bond deeper than language or biology, and that sometimes, when you least expected it, help came from the most unlikely places, singing ancient songs of comfort and hope that echoed through the mountains like prayers made manifest. In the sanctuary that would forever bear her name, Singing Moon continued her role as guardian of the valley, protecting all who dwelled the